So now we move into the consideration of the chemical bonds, which is a little bit more about, which is a little bit more important than what we have looked at in the first session of the lecture. So these through chemical bonds, after all, we are able to form all different types of molecules. Okay, so that's one goal of us to be able to understand better about this whole life internal contents. So definition of the molecule is what something is not right. So more than one elements combined together. The way it's just think of this way: the chemical bonds are type of glue, molecular glues. So there are just like we have different kinds of glues. A very strong, instantaneous super glue we have, and some other weaker glue only suitable for pasting on the papers. Glues are there. Several different types of with different strengths are there. Similarly, the chemical bonds. There are several different kinds of bonds, and however, regardless of their respective strengths, all of these bonds are equally importantly utilized in maintaining the life system. Is the main thing. So that is the definition of the molecule. However, sometimes you may find another term called the compound. What is compound? Compound is if that element is like participating in this bond formations are totally different kinds. So here the molecule build up using only the same kind of more than two in numbers element is not counted as one of the compound. So if you simply look at the example, it will be much clearer. Like carbon dioxide, which is a legitimate molecule because one carbon having two oxygen bonded together. And by the way, none of you have to memorize anything like that. I'm just simply showing this. A lot of those frequently appearing molecules that you will probably see more than once throughout the lecture in the semester. I'm just putting them here to show as an example of these molecules. But other than that, if you are really kind of unfamiliar, I have never seen anything like this before in my entire life. Good for you. You've been lucky. So think of that way. So the carbon dioxide and the CH4, which is a methane, which is like a lot of the gas, which was especially abundant in the ancient days of the Earth, and hydrogen gas also, like two hydrogen bonded together to have in particular type of a chemical bond. Then hydrogen gas. The same thing is for the oxygen. And NH3 is an ammonia. Once again, it is a gas. And the nitrogen gas. All of these are more than one element were put together to have a specific type of chemical bond. Here, another such different type of chemical bond. And sodium chloride. We all know, it was just so familiar with the sodium chloride. That's a table salt. And similar salt like a calcium chloride over here too. And finally this glucose, even though none of you have to worry about this remembering actual chemical formula, which is a C6H12O6, but this is another such a kind of. Here all of these are relatively very simple molecules, but in reality we do have so much more complex type of chemicals, the molecules with many different types of chemical bonds. are out there too. So these are the examples of molecule. However, once you look at this compound, then what's missing? All those that having same guys appearing more than once here, these guys were all excluded. So you are, even though you are a part of molecules, but not as a compound. So that's the difference between compound and molecule. Is it important? At least for me, no, not at all. Who cares? Just whether it is a compound or is a molecule, that means that as long as you remember, you understand that those were the one actually resulted in as a result of that produced as a result of this chemical bond formation. The goal over here, once again here in this particular section, is to understand, look at the different types of chemical bond and why certain particular chemical bonds are used in biology in specific occasions is the only thing that matters here. So that's the overstatement of these elements from chemical bonds to become molecules. So there are several different types of chemical bonds exist. Okay, all of them are important in maintaining all different aspects of life. Now, first type of chemical bond that we want to look at is ionic bond. As its name suggests, right? It's just the league of their own. Only the ions can participate. They have this membership. So if you are not an ion, then you are not eligible for having any type of such the ionic bond. So how can I become an ion? Well, it's simple. Either you lose or gain ion. Okay. Because proton always discharge. Charge differences is maintained. The charge balance, I say. Charge balance is maintained with the better equal number things between the number of proton and the number of electrons. As long as they are in a state of the equal, same, then there is no charge. But once there is a discrepancy, then there will be either positive or negatively charged ions will result. But usually proton cannot really have any such a flexibility of like I will lose myself or I will gain myself. It will be very, very, very difficult things. It's much easier for the electron to do things because they are the one who actually patrol the outside, the external boundary of any given atom. So you become an ion, either positive or negative. If you lose an electron, you become suddenly positively charged. If you lose, then you become positively charged ion. If you found some electrons on the way home, oh, goody, was my lucky day, then you become a negatively charged ion. That's all. So once you become an ion, then plus and minus. Always, if you have this type of a plus and minus, then you have a mutual attraction. You cannot describe what it is, but you are attracted to the opposite, the other side. You know that. So when they ionize, so they the reason why they want to become such an ionized entity is more important. Why do some element want to become an ionized? Because by doing so, they can do this. The ultimate goal of becoming such an inert, noble gas type of entity. So if by just dumping one or two electrons, if I can become the status of a maximum, the valence shell electrons up to the maximum, so it's all filled up. Yeah, that will be the super thing. On the other hand, hey, in my case, if I actually only obtain somehow pick up one or two electrons, then I will become such thing. Then you just do it. So that's how you become ion. So not all the element can obviously do that, but here this is such a classic example of such, like sodium as an element, is a metal, and chlorine usually is a gas. And both status in an as a like a uncharged element status, they are ions. But the reason why both of this sodium and chlorine would be easily become an ion of the opposite charge. Sodium will become a positively charged ion, and chlorine will become a negatively charged ion. Is because once they do, then both of them will become the one having the full, their valence electrons are fulfilled, so to speak. So then now you are looking at totally new material. Now we call them a sodium chloride, which is not a metal or gas, but a kind of a crystal powder. So here the reason why I'm showing once again this ugly periodic table is to show that not all, to prove that not all elements can can play this ion card. Like certain group of elements have a much easier path to become like a noble gas. For example, look at all this group of the green box. They are called the halogen. They are, in a sense, like to become. What does it take for them to become such to reach into the right next to this the neighbor, the noble gas? It takes only one more electrons for them. So all they gotta do is obtain one more electron, then they can fill their outermost electron shell, which is a valence electron shell, to have the maximum number of electrons. On the other hand, the other side of the spectrum, look at this beige or maybe light orange group, which is called the alkali metals. They are the ones actually having in common is the one having one more extra electrons in their outermost shell. So for them to fill up all other remaining electrons, this is impossible, but rather it's much easier for them to just dump one electron extra, then their entire outside the external outermost electron shell can be cancelled. So then now they become the second next the second the best or second most electron, the energy shell, all of a sudden become the outermost, the valence shell, and then just obtain their sort of inert status of unreactive status. That's how you do it, and that's the origin of such ionic bond. So in the case of sodium, which belongs to one of the member of this alkali metal, the metal is having this one extra electrons over here. Okay, so all you gotta do is, hey, if I can dump, and just go ahead and do it. Dump the electrons. So by dumping that electron over here, they become now this. Their second electron shell all of a sudden became the valence shell, and the only compensation they have to make is now they just take on, because the number of electrons versus number of proton does not match equal afterwards, so it will become positively plus one positively charged element. Okay. And on the other hand, in the case of chlorine, over the other end of this periodic table, what's happening is the opposite problem exists for the this chlorine. All it takes is just one more electron. So actually, if they can get together, hey, I will dump my electron, then you receive my electron, so that both of us to become oppositely charged ions. So would it be really an ideal things? Yes, in many ways. So after receiving one extra electron, somebody dumped, and then this chlorine will become now chloride ion. Okay, and since we have one more extra electron, now it will become this minus negatively charged ion. Okay, so once both parties become this the oppositely charged ion, there will be some attractive force will be generated. Like what are you doing here? Yes, generated. Okay, and so this is what we call an ionic bond. Okay, so that like a sodium chloride, as we have seen, and other similar type of such ions like calcium sulfate and magnesium chloride, and you have many different examples of such ionic bond. Okay, so what's happening is like in diagram, it will be seen like this. So having dumping and picking up the extra electrons, both of them become charged, and between this charged molecule, the attraction will appear like this. Okay, in more realistic view of like from the quantum mechanics or quantum physics viewpoint, what you see is this sodium chloride now have this electron transfer and a bond formation. But in reality, it is not something that on a one-on-one basis the relationship established, but this in over sodium and the chloride ion crystals, they have this all this plus and minus charge attractions are the force holding all these individual ions together in the form of this crystal. So that's basically the nature of the ionic bond, like this. Okay. All this, so the ions, even though they are in the form of this crystal, once they are in the water, dumped into the water, they will quickly go into the solution. Why? Because some individual water molecule will play some, also have this opposite charge based attraction and act as a shield for each of the individual ion. So let's say this was the case of a sodium, positively charged sodium. By the way, the positively charged, the name for the positively charged ion is a cation. Whereas the negatively charged ion's name is called the anion. So both anion and cation in the solution, we are talking about this solution. Water-based solution. Water. This water-based solution, by the way, is called the aqueous solution, which you are going to see in somewhere out there in the lecture handout. This water solution, I don't like this color. I like this color better. Because individual water molecule itself is a little bit slightly, they are not ions. This water molecule is not an ion, which means they don't have any like apparent charge, but they have this very discrete ambiguous, or a little bit slightly ambiguous charge. We call it as a partial charge or anything, which we are going to see the reason soon. Yeah, in today. So they do have their own types of such like the pole charge attraction. They can participate in this interaction with both the cation and anion like this. So in the case of anion, the positive side, the part of the water molecule will have this interaction, plus and minus. And for this cation, the negative part of this water molecule, which is coming from the oxygen part, will have the attractions. So that's the reason why all these ions go so easily into the solution. They will very readily dissolve in the water. All those ions or those material formed through the ionic bond will be readily, easily dissolved in the water. Why? Because water itself is a polar molecule. Water is a polar material. Okay, so here the same thing is being displayed in another figure, but the reason why I'm showing over here once again is to introduce the conventional way of depicting each different element in the model, especially in the organic chemistry in model presentation. Always by convention, the carbon is described in the black ball. This the carbon is a black thing, and oxygen is in red, and hydrogens are white. And sometimes when you need to put some nitrogen and a phosphorus, they have their own different colors. So here, just by looking at, without any labeling, just by looking at this type of model, everyone knows that, okay, this must be an oxygen because this is red, and this must be an hydrogen, types of stuff like that. So ionic bond strength, how strong is it? It's relatively weak. It's not strong. Okay? So obviously one thing important is that you cannot rely this ionic bond on establishing the so-called the macromolecules. Then you will be in big trouble because the bond strength is not strong enough to hold all different part of the molecule together firmly. So you will have to actually come up with the different types of chemical bond for that purpose. So, but nonetheless, this ionic bond is very important in many different aspects of the biological process. For one thing, proteins are very, very delicate structure. So you have to, for the protein's function, the maintaining the very accurate, delicate protein structure is very important. And ionic bond is one of the several such weak chemical bond which are heavily and then significantly utilized in such purposes. So protein structure maintenance is one thing. Another very good example of the ionic bond that you can witness in life is the DNA and the protein interactions. Here you can see basically what it is DNA as our genetic material does not exist like DNA is alone. It's not, so to speak, naked. They are heavily covered with some other, so to speak, you can view it as a protective layer or maybe some other. So anyway, basically lots of proteins are there to cover the DNA, and those proteins, what's the basis of this like a chemical or mechanical basis for those proteins being able to specifically cover with DNA is the DNA, the surface, outside the surface of DNA is extremely negatively charged like this. Okay? And taking advantage of that chemical property of DNA, which is highly negatively charged, some proteins been developed in the cell. So the surface of some proteins are like particularly and extremely positively charged. And this between positively charged part and the negatively charged surface of DNA usually have a very good interaction, very attractive each other, and that is the principle of such DNA and protein interaction, which if some of you just go up to the advanced level of the life science, then you will get to see very many examples of that actually having the practical the applications of in many ways. So that's about the ionic bond. Now another type, different kind of chemical bond called covalent bond is. It is a chemical bond formed by it's a covalent. The valence is like commonly valent things. Think of this way. So you are sharing. It's not like trying to. It's a new, probably a modern concept of the running the economy maybe. So you don't try to own anything, your property, but you try to share your property with somebody else's. So increasing the efficiency. So this chemical bond is formed when two elements decided to share their outside, the outermost, the valence electrons, so that both can achieve that status of this, the valence shell fulfilled to the maximum. Certain element, it is extremely difficult for them to either dump entire the unnecessary outside electron shell to become the valence electron shell filled, or the other way around. Then what's the alternative? For those elements having these similar difficulties, the good alternative and practically doable feasible alternative would be, hey, let's have this property in common. This thing is for you and me as well, is the new concept. And that's the type of interaction is recognized to us as a covalent bond. So for that covalent bond, I do also have such. So like I said, all these short movies are there for those who can take advantage of the big size file of different version of the lecture handout. But for those who are not able to enjoy such things, then here I'm at least for now giving you during the taking up my precious lecture time, I'm showing you this video, which I shouldn't have in the beginning. So.
Covalent bonds form when electrons from two different atoms combine to form an electron pair that is shared by both atoms. These two hydrogen atoms each have one electron. As the atoms get closer together, the negatively charged electrons from each atom repel each other, but they also experience an attraction to the positively charged nucleus of the other atom. The electrons cross a threshold when the atoms are within bonding distance, and they become equally distributed around both nuclei. A covalent bond forms. The two hydrogen atoms now form the hydrogen molecule H2. There are several ways to represent molecules. The electron cloud view shows the distribution of electrons. The ball and stick view emphasizes the bond between atoms. Both show the same thing, a covalent bond.
Okay. So here, from the quantum physics viewpoint, these two hydrogen elements, like if you ask why do they do that, this like a covalent bond formation, because then the most straightforward answer is the energy. Obviously, energy. So by compare with each individual element trying to maintain their own the electrons independently, if you calculate the potential energy level, the potential energy level that can be calculated, and once you have this sharing electrons, significantly lower this potential energy, so that they can enjoy the status of a more stable. So in terms of always, whenever you can lower the potential energy of something, which means you have higher entropy. So entropy will go up, the value, by doing so. And in practice, what's happening is, because if you think about the electrons, which is negatively charged, like the idea of sharing these two electrons from to the surface, then one might ask that, hey, how can it be possible? Because these two electrons of a same negative charge will repel each other. Now, how can you? What do you mean by sharing these two electrons? Would it be even is it possible? Yes, it is, because that is one only you are looking at from one angle, but by having these two electrons moving, they are like a common. Now this shared orbital. Now for both of them, they have an access to the other elements, the partner elements, the proton, which then between the electron and proton they can have this attraction, which will lower the potential energy. That's the whole idea of having this covalent bond. So once again, just like the case of the ionic bond, by doing so they can become much more stabilized entity. That's why covalent bond is formed, and like the imitating the famous the commercial of from Apple, the iPod or anything. The covalent bond can be described as like a sharing this one listening device like this, so that they can have a stronger bond together and can have a much more elevated level of enjoyment, so to speak. So there are so many different examples of such covalent bond, as you can imagine easily. So these two hydrogens existing as in the form of gas actually is the result of, by the way, only those elements or molecules formed having these covalent bonds are expressed or depicted using this solid line. So whenever you see a solid line between two elements, oh, okay, so these guys are having the covalent bond. So H and H, so this solid line indicate such the covalent bond. So in the case of oxygen, the gas, hey, why do you have this double line, which means two covalent bond, which means for each of these oxygen elements, two, not a one, but two elements, two electrons are shared at the same time. Then you can have this double covalent bond status. And let's take a look at this, the water, H2O. Now even in this water, you can also see have an information about this geometric, the angle of this bond formation due to the big difference between the force to attract the electrons. Simply put, they establish this particular geometric angle between an oxygen and hydrogen. Okay. And in the case of a methane, have the four equal the directions at the same time. The four available hydrogen. Why I am just drawing once again? Like very stupid. It looks like stupid. Okay. So for this carbon, there are four available such electrons that each of which can be shared and form the covalent bond, and each of them is doing that. So for independent hydrogen element is involved in such electron sharing. So overall, all parties can achieve this maximum number of electrons on their valence shell is the idea. So even this covalent bond, speaking of this covalent bond, not only double bond that as you have seen in the example of an oxygen, but sometimes even triple bonds, even quadruple bonds. Sometimes it's there's been a claim that the quadruple covalent bond is actually theoretically and also practically possible. There's been recent reports. So some element, the point is even not even the double bond, but in some cases like these triple bonds are also possible in terms of a covalent. Okay, so the important characteristic of this covalent bond is it is the one responsible for this so-called the macromolecules. Okay, so thanks to this covalent bond, all different types of a variety of stable macromolecules are built and established. Okay, so in particular, for this covalent bond and macromolecule formation, the role of carbon has been the pivotal. Okay, so the fact that carbon has a very unique the geometry, molecular geometry, carbon is able to form at the same time instantly form a four covalent bonds at the time in all four different directions, which we describe as a so-called tetrahedral directions. It's like inside of a pyramid. If you are in the pyramid, and then if you look at all these different points toward, then establish the chemical bond, that would be an example of such the tetrahedral direction of this bond formation. So in other words, not only two-dimensionally, but there's like a three-dimensionally, this carbon can expand the covalent bond formation, because in doing so you can also have the covalent bond with another carbon, as you can easily imagine. So you can keep expanding those whole area and the magnitude of the dimension and magnitude of this covalent bond once you include all those carbons in the bond formation. So like here's an example of such carbon. In the case of methane, actually, when its carbon is forming the covalent bond with four hydrogen, that's how you do it. It's like this is the each angles of, so this is what we call as a tetrahedral geometry of carbon covalent bond formation angle. So if you do this, and the thing is here, this any position, not only hydrogen or any other element, but carbon itself can also become So you can keep expanding the whole this dimension of that whatever the macromolecule you are building. So as a result, you can make very big. So that's what we call as a macromolecule, big molecule, and that's the reason why I have stated that only carbon, the organic. So only there is such a thing like the organic macromolecule. There is no such thing like an inorganic macromolecule, because without letting carbon being involved, there is no way you can do this huge, extensive enlargement of this covalent bond formation. And this one such example that you have in your the lecture handout is so this tetrahedron, how you can expand your like I keep forgetting about the proper word of, so I don't want to just repeating the vocabulary that I have just put up, so I'm just keep trying to think of another vocabulary that pop up in my head, but I'm too stupid for that, so you know what I mean. So it will have a huge dimension of I hate using another once again the word dimension here. So is there any other better proper replacement for this dimension? So I have to keep trying, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. So carbon's chemical versatility is not only you can you have this big molecule using this carbon's unique geometry, but also carbon has a single bond, and carbon can easily form a double bond, and in some cases a triple bond, as you have seen. So you can have many different way of the angles and the flexibility of in forming the molecules. So when you have carbon connected, two carbons connected in a single covalent bond, and each the entity of this carbon having other the attachment are very free in the revolving, so they can rotate very freely, so that it can form many different flexible structure and architecture. Whereas when you have this double bond formation, carbon double bond area, it has a very flat and rigid surface in terms of its structure. So you have so many different structure and angles of different shapes can be generated by. And also another very important thing is this, the cyclizing things. So I have to probably explain this. Yeah, by having this cyclized chain, the ring chain, carbon is the one having so much extensive usage of this ring structure of that have many implications in many different area of life science as important materials. So many different such structural versatilities come from carbon, which are very much essential for all those life activities. Okay, that's about the covalent bond. And now, what about another type of chemical bond called hydrogen bond?